And please tell me in the comments where you're listening from. I would love to interact with you legends. Now to the story. I thought staying over at his place would just be a normal thing couples eventually do. You know, you start off meeting for coffee, then hanging out late, and suddenly you're brushing your teeth in someone else's bathroom and leaving your hoodie on their chair like it's no big deal. That's how it started with me and Aaron. He lived in this old apartment block tucked between a laundromat and a discount store. Nothing fancy, just one of those brick buildings with peeling paint and flickering hallway lights. The kind of place where the carpet in the hall is permanently stained, and you can smell everyone's dinner when you walk up the stairs. The first night I stayed there, I didn't think much of it. He had a small one-bedroom, open kitchen, couch that looked like it had been through at least 2 moves. The bed creaked, but it was fine. What got me was the walls. They were thin, like you could hear the plumbing shift whenever someone upstairs flushed. I figured I'd just have to get used to it. But after a couple more nights, I realized it wasn't just the pipes. Lying awake, I'd catch these faint sounds. Not like neighbors or people outside, but closer. Inside, a scrape, then a pause, like someone dragging their nails along the inside of the drywall. I told myself maybe it was mice. I'd never lived in a place that old, so yeah, probably just mice. I started noticing little things, though. A glass I left on the counter would be in the sink. A pair of my socks went missing from my bag. The bathroom light would be on when I knew I turned it off. At first, I thought Aaron was just absent-minded, or maybe I was. But then I stayed alone there while he was at work. That's when it really got weird. The place felt different without him. Too quiet, but not in a peaceful way, like the air was holding its breath. I tried watching TV, scrolling on my phone, but I kept catching this subtle rhythm, a faint tapping that seemed to come from the wall behind the couch. Not random either, almost like someone trying not to be noticed. I pressed my ear to the wall once, half joking to myself, but my chest tightened when I heard it. Breathing. Slow, steady breathing right on the other side of the plaster. I jerked back so fast I nearly fell over. There was no apartment on the other side of that wall. It was supposed to be the end of the building. I didn't tell Aaron right away because how do you even bring that up? Hey, I think someone's living inside your walls. He would have laughed. But the next morning I saw something that made my stomach drop. In the corner of the bedroom where the carpet pulled away from the baseboard, there was this slit. Like the wall had been peeled back and then pushed into place again, just wide enough for someone's fingers to slip through. I tried to ignore it, but once you see something like that, you can't unsee it. Every night I stayed, the noises grew clearer. The scraping, the shuffle. Once, when Aaron was asleep, I swore I heard someone whisper. Not words I could make out, just a low mumbling right by the headboard. I barely slept. Things escalated when I started leaving little tests. I'd set my phone charger on the table at an angle just to see. I'd come back, and it'd be shifted slightly, like someone had picked it up and set it down again. One night, I left crumbs of chips on the counter on purpose. When I woke up, the crumbs were gone, not in the trash, just gone. I was losing it, thinking maybe I was imagining stuff, until I caught sight of him. It was past midnight. I'd gone to grab water, and I didn't turn the kitchen light on because I didn't want to wake Aaron. Out of the corner of my eye by the hallway wall, I saw a hand. Pale, thin, darting back into the slit near the floor. I froze, the glass slipping from my grip and shattering. Aaron came running out, asking what happened, and I couldn't even explain. I just stood there staring at the wall like it was breathing. From then on, I couldn't stay there without panic crawling under my skin. Aaron never noticed. He thought the noises were just the building settling, thought I was paranoid. But I knew. Someone else was in there. Someone who didn't want to be seen. The last night I ever stayed over, I woke up to the sound of the bedroom closet door rattling. Not just shaking from airflow or pipes, like someone was inside pushing against it. I didn't wake Aaron. I just lay there, stiff, staring at the closet. The door didn't open, but I heard movement. Slow steps retreating, then the soft scrape of drywall flexing shut. That was it for me. The next morning I told Aaron I couldn't do this anymore. Didn't even make it about him. Just mumbled something about not being comfortable there. He was confused, even kind of annoyed, but I didn't care. I left and never went back. Months later, I heard from a friend who still lived near that building. They said the cops were swarming the place one day. Apparently, maintenance workers found a whole hollow space carved between the walls of several apartments. Blankets, food wrappers, even a small mattress stuffed into a crawl space. Someone had been living in there for months, maybe longer. I never asked for details. I didn't want to know if it was the same walls I'd been sleeping against, the same breathing I'd heard while lying next to Aaron. All I know is I was right. I wasn't alone in that apartment. And I still can't sleep if I hear scratching in the walls. When I first matched with her, it felt way too easy. She wasn't just attractive, she was the type of person who actually texted back quickly, didn't make things awkward, and seemed to get my jokes without me having to explain them. We went for a late night coffee on our first date, and I remember thinking it was like meeting someone I already known for years. She had these small habits that made her feel real, like she tapped her nail against her cup when she was thinking, and she'd tuck her hair behind her ear even when it wasn't in her face. Stuff that makes you stop staring at looks and start noticing the little things. After that night, it turned into regular meetups. We didn't do anything crazy, mostly late dinners or hanging around her flat watching movies. She lived alone, at least that's what she said, in a quiet block of apartments just off a busier road. Nothing creepy about it, just another normal flat. She didn't bring up family much, only mentioned that she didn't talk to them often. I didn't push because honestly, I was just glad I wasn't dealing with someone who wanted to overshare every detail of their life on the first week. The weeks stacked up and she kind of became part of my routine. My mates would joke that I disappeared, but I didn't care. Everything about her just clicked. And then one random Saturday, it all cracked open. I was in the city grabbing a takeaway, and I swear I spotted her. Same jacket, same hair, same way she moved. Except she wasn't alone. She was with a group of people, laughing, carrying shopping bags. I thought it was weird because she told me she was staying home that day. But whatever, maybe she changed her plans and didn't think to update me. I caught up to her near the station. I called her name. She stopped, turned around, and I swear my brain just froze. It was her, but not her. Same exact face, same voice when she answered, but she looked at me like I was a stranger. I told her we'd been seeing each other. She just laughed awkwardly and told me she didn't know me. Then she said the thing that messed me up completely. She said she didn't have a sister. That night I texted the girl I'd been seeing. She replied instantly like nothing had happened. Told me she'd been home all day, feeling tired. I sat there staring at the screen, remembering the other girl's voice telling me she didn't have a sister. I didn't even know what to say back. I kept it to myself for a while, thinking maybe I was overthinking. Maybe it was some weird prank. Maybe I ran into her cousin or something. But the more I thought about it, the less sense it made. They weren't just similar, they were identical. The next couple of weeks with her felt off. She didn't act different. She still laughed at the same stuff, still tapped her nail on cups, still tucked her hair behind her ear. But I couldn't stop thinking about that day. It was like I was watching her too closely, waiting to see a slip, waiting for her to admit something. Then things around her apartment started to feel wrong. She'd step out to grab something from the shop, and I'd swear I'd hear footsteps upstairs, only to remember she lived on the top floor. Her bathroom mirror always had faint streaks, like someone else had been in there wiping it down. And once when I went to grab a drink from her fridge, I found 2 cartons of milk, both opened, both nearly empty. She lived alone, right? The breaking point came when I stayed over and woke up in the middle of the night. I thought I heard voices in the hallway. Not from a neighbor, but right outside her flat door. One of them sounded exactly like her. I sat up staring at the door, waiting for it to open. Nothing. Just silence. When she came back to bed, she didn't mention leaving the room at all. I couldn't take it anymore. A few days later, I went back to the station where I met the other version of her. I actually saw her again. She was alone this time. I walked up, nervous as hell, and asked her straight out if she knew someone with her face. She told me no. She told me again that she didn't have a sister, didn't have a twin, didn't know me. I left shaking. I didn't even go back to the girl's place after that. I blocked her number, deleted her socials, just cut it all off. A month later, one of my mates sent me a link to a news story. It was about a woman found in a flat not too far from mine. The article didn't say much, just that she'd been living under a false name, moving between different apartments in the area. The picture they used hit me like a punch. It was her. The girl I'd been seeing, or maybe the one I'd met at the station. I honestly couldn't tell anymore. They never said who she really was or why she was lying. It just mentioned she'd been reported missing years before by a family that insisted she was an only child. Sometimes I wonder if there were 2 of them. Maybe I dated one and ran into the other. Or maybe it was just one playing both parts, making me question what was real. Either way, I don't go near that part of town anymore. It felt kind of refreshing when he said he was divorced. Most guys my age either pretended they had never been in a serious relationship or they were too immature to admit they'd messed one up. At least he was upfront. He told me about it on our second date, said it didn't work out, but there were no hard feelings. I believed him. He had that calm way of talking like he'd already moved past all the drama. I figured he just wanted to start over, and I liked that idea. We'd been meeting up for weeks, always casual stuff walks, food, sitting by the canal near his place. Nothing dramatic. He didn't push for anything too fast, and I thought that was proof he was being genuine. He said he lived alone in a rented flat, and from the way he carried himself, I didn't think twice. One night we decided to meet at this little Italian spot he picked. It wasn't fancy, but it was a kind of place where the lights were low and the music was soft. I got there first and sat down near the back. The whole room smelled like garlic and bread. I remember thinking it was the nicest date we'd had so far, like things were finally moving into something more serious. He arrived looking a bit rushed, tied loose, hair still damp like he'd showered too quickly. He apologized and said work was stressing him out. I let it go and we ordered. For the first half hour, it was normal food, small talk, him making me laugh about how bad he was at cooking. I was halfway through my pasta when everything went sideways. The door slammed open, hard enough that everyone turned to look. A woman stood there, red in the face, holding a baby on her hip. The baby was screaming, but she wasn't trying to soothe it. She was staring straight at us, more specifically at him. My chest tightened immediately. You could just feel it. The energy in the room flipped. He froze, fork halfway to his mouth. She marched over, shoving chairs out of the way, yelling before she even reached the table. Everyone's eyes followed her. She planted herself in front of us and started unloading on him. That's when I realized she wasn't his ex-wife. She was his wife. Present tense. The way she spit his name out, the way she threw down a bag stuffed with baby toys, bottles, and clothes, it was obvious. She shouted about how he hadn't been home in 2 nights, about how the baby hadn't stopped crying, about how she found my name in his texts. My face burned, and I couldn't even move. The baby wailed louder, and she adjusted it on her shoulder like she'd done it 1,000 times before. She looked at me for the first time, eyes sharp, wet with tears, and I felt sick. She asked if I knew she was still his wife, if I knew I was sitting in a restaurant with her child's father while she was left picking up the pieces. I couldn't speak. My throat closed up. The entire restaurant was dead silent except for her voice and the baby's cries. He tried to stand, tried to calm her, but she shoved him back down so hard his chair scraped. People started whispering at other tables. Some pulled out their phones. I don't even know how long it lasted. She kept throwing words at him, each one sharper than the last. She told him he'd lied to her about everything, lied about where he was, lied about working late. I just sat there staring at my plate, wishing I could disappear. At one point, she picked up a breadstick from our basket and hurled it at him, like she didn't care if it looked ridiculous. It hit him in the chest, bounced to the floor, and the baby cried even harder. He begged her to stop, but she didn't. She kept going until her face was blotchy and her voice cracked. Then she turned back to me. She said I should be ashamed, that I was part of the reason her marriage was falling apart. My hands shook under the table. I wanted to explain that I had no idea, that he told me he was divorced, that I wouldn't have touched him otherwise. But nothing came out, just silence. Finally, she scooped up the baby bag, adjusted the baby again, and stormed out. The door slammed behind her. The whole restaurant exhaled at once, like they'd all been holding their breath. He sat there pale and sweating, staring at the table. I grabbed my coat and left without saying a word. He didn't try to stop me. Outside, I saw her at the corner, waiting for a taxi with a baby. She didn't look at me. I didn't go near her. I just kept walking until I was blocks away. That was the last time I ever saw him. He texted me a few days later, begging to explain, saying things weren't how they looked. But I deleted the messages without reading them all the way through. Weeks later, I heard from someone who worked in the same building as him. They said he quit suddenly, stopped showing up, and no one knew where he went. I didn't care. What I can't forget isn't even him. It's her face. The way she stood there in that restaurant with her baby in her arms, looking like she'd been humiliated 100 times before that night, and this was just the one time everyone else finally saw it. That's burned into me more than anything he ever said. I should have left the second she said her apartment was a little weird. Most people say messy, small, cozy. She said weird. I laughed it off, thought she meant she had eccentric taste in posters or too many plants. I didn't realize she actually meant weird. We'd been talking for a couple of weeks. She was quick with replies, a little sarcastic but funny. She kept suggesting we hang out at her place instead of bars or cafes. I assumed it was a money thing or maybe she was just shy about going out. I didn't question it. When she finally sent me her address, I got on the train without thinking twice. The building itself wasn't anything special. Old brick buzzer system that didn't even work. She came down to let me in, smiling like nothing was out of the ordinary. Her flat was on the third floor, tucked at the end of a long hallway that smelled faintly like cleaning supplies and cigarettes. When I walked in, the first thing I noticed was how clean it was. Not just tidy, spotless. No dishes in the sink, no dust on the shelves, no shoes scattered near the door. It looked staged like a photo in a rental ad. She laughed when I hesitated and told me to sit down. We talked for a while in the living room. She poured us drinks, asked about work, asked about my friends, basic stuff. I couldn't stop glancing around, though. Everything felt too neat, too arranged. Her couch was angled perfectly to the TV. The books on her shelf were organized by size. Even the coasters on the coffee table were lined up like she measured them. After an hour, she asked if I wanted to see her room. She said it casually, like she was showing me where the bathroom was. I followed her down a narrow hallway. The walls were bare, no pictures, no art, nothing. Her bedroom door creaked when she opened it. The first thing I noticed was how dark it was inside. Heavy curtains blocked out the streetlights, and only a single lamp glowed in the corner. The bed was neatly made, not a wrinkle on the blanket. I stepped inside, and that's when I saw the cases. They lined the far wall. Glass display cases like the kind you see in antique shops or museums. At first, I thought maybe she collected coins or stamps. But as I walked closer, my stomach twisted. They weren't coins. They were wallets. Dozens of them. Different sizes, colors, styles. Some were worn down like they'd been carried for years. Others looked almost new, barely creased. Next to them were rows of watches neatly arranged on velvet stands. Metal bands, leather straps, digital, analog. And then the worst part, IDs. Driver's licenses, college cards, gym memberships, each one propped up in its own slot. All men. Every single one of them. I froze, staring through the glass. My first thought was maybe she worked in Lost and Found. Maybe she collected old stuff people threw away, but the sheer number of them didn't make sense. There had to be 50 at least, probably more. She sat casually on the edge of her bed, watching me, not saying anything, just letting me look. The silence stretched too long. My pulse hammered in my ears. I tried to act normal, asked her about the cases like it was a cool hobby. She tilted her head, smiled slightly, and told me she liked keeping memories. That was all, nothing else. Something in her tone made my throat dry. Memories. I scanned the room again. The surfaces were spotless, but the cases weren't dusty. That meant she cleaned them often, touched them, adjusted them. Some of the wallets had receipts sticking out of them, like they'd been taken recently. I could see dates printed on the slips. Last month, last week. My brain scrambled for explanations. Maybe she was a scammer, maybe she stole identities, maybe she just liked collecting random junk. But none of those options explained the sheer amount of stuff. None of it explained why they were displayed like trophies. She stood up slowly, walked over, and opened one of the cases. She pulled out a watch, held it in her hand, and said it belonged to someone special. Then she set it back down carefully, almost lovingly, and shut the case again. I forced a laugh, pretending it was quirky, pretending I wasn't seconds from bolting. My palms were sweating, and I kept calculating how long it would take me to get to the front door. She asked if I wanted to stay the night. I told her I couldn't. I made up some excuse about work in the morning. She didn't argue. She just smiled that same smile she gave me when she first opened the door, like she already knew the answer. Walking out of that apartment felt like leaving a trap. I kept my eyes forward, heart pounding, waiting for her to stop me. She didn't. She just stood in the doorway and watched me leave. I didn't run until I hit the street. When I got home, I couldn't stop thinking about the IDs. The names, the faces, the sheer number of them. I wanted to look some of them up, but part of me was scared of what I'd find. Missing persons. Old news articles. I didn't do it. I didn't want to know. I unmatched her, deleted her number, wiped every trace of her from my phone. But sometimes when I'm walking down crowded streets, I swear I see one of those faces from the IDs. Familiar, but I can't place it. Like I've already seen them somewhere they shouldn't be. And I always wonder how many display cases she is now. When he pulled up outside my place, I thought he looked cooler than usual. He was leaning back in this sleek little black car, windows down, music low. I'd only ever seen him walking before, so I assumed he finally gotten himself a car. I climbed in, and he grinned like he was proud of it. We drove off, and the whole ride felt kind of surreal. You know how someone looks different behind the wheel? More confident, more in control. That's how he seemed. He kept fiddling with the radio, drumming on the steering wheel like he'd been driving this car for years. The interior smelled faintly of vanilla, that kind of sweet car freshener you buy at petrol stations. I remember thinking it didn't really match him, but I brushed it off. He said we were going to this little Italian spot he liked. The drive wasn't long, maybe 15 minutes, but he parked in a sketchy side street tucked between two rundown shops. I thought it was strange he didn't park closer to the restaurant, but he said he didn't want to deal with tight spaces. I didn't argue. Dinner was fine. Not amazing, not terrible. Just another night. He kept checking his phone, though, and at first I thought he was just distracted, but later I realized he was anxious. He barely touched his food, and whenever headlights flashed past the restaurant window, he glanced up too quickly. After we ate, we walked back toward the car. I remember the exact moment my stomach dropped. The space where he parked was empty. Just cracked pavement and oil stains. No car. I froze, thinking maybe I'd gotten the spot wrong. But he stopped dead too, staring at the space like someone had stolen his whole life. His face went pale, then red, then blank. I asked if he locked it, if he maybe parked down a little further, but he just stood there gripping his phone like he was about to crush it. I thought he'd call the police, but he didn't. He started pacing, muttering to himself, rubbing his hand through his hair. Finally, he looked at me with this deadpan expression and said something I'll never forget. He admitted it wasn't his car. My brain stuttered, not his car. Then whose was it? He told me it belonged to his ex, that he'd taken it from her driveway. He said she still had a spare key, so she must have tracked us down and taken it back. My heart lurched into my throat. We just spent 2 hours eating pasta while his ex knew exactly where we were, watching the car she owned park outside. I stood there stunned. People walked past us, laughing, carrying takeaway boxes, totally oblivious, while my date casually admitted he borrowed his ex a car without asking. The same ex who apparently was furious enough to stalk him down and reclaim it in the middle of our date. I wanted to leave, but I didn't even know how. My phone battery was nearly dead, and we were blocks away from the main road. He kept insisting it was no big deal, that she did this kind of thing all the time, that I shouldn't worry. His calmness made it worse, like this wasn't even shocking to him. He suggested we just grab a bus, but he didn't have his wallet. It had been in the car. He didn't even have his house keys. Everything he owned was in that vehicle, and now it was gone. We ended up walking. The streets were quiet, damp from an earlier drizzle, and every time headlights passed us, my skin prickled. I couldn't shake the image of his ex driving slowly behind us, waiting for the right moment to pull up. He didn't seem fazed. He kept talking about her, ranting about how controlling she was, how she always tried to ruin things for him. By the time we got to my area, I felt drained. He asked if he could crash at mine since he didn't have his keys. My whole body screamed no, but I didn't know how to say it without making him snap. So I lied, said my flatmate was sick, said it wouldn't be a good idea. He looked annoyed but didn't push. I gave him money for a taxi, just to get rid of him. He pocketed it like he expected me to do that, like this was routine. Watching him disappear into the night, I felt a wave of relief so strong my knees nearly buckled. Later that week, I had a message from a random number. It was her, his ex. She told me to stay away from him. Said he'd done this before, that I wasn't the first girl he tried to impress by driving her car around like it was his. She said she'd let him borrow it at first, but when she found out he was taking new dates to restaurants in it, she'd started hunting him down. That night at the Italian place wasn't even the first time she'd reclaimed it mid-date. She ended the message by saying I should be glad it was her that showed up, and not someone else he owed. That line stuck with me. I never answered. I blocked both of them. Sometimes, though, I think about how normal the night started, and leaning against the car, music playing, me climbing in like it was just another date. For 2 hours, I believed the whole picture he painted. And then the truth tore it all down in a single sentence. He never even owned a car. The night I decided to stay over, I wasn't expecting anything wild. It wasn't even planned. We'd been out late, grabbed greasy food on the way back, and instead of heading across town to my place, we crashed at hers. It felt practical, not intimate. A normal, almost boring decision. Her flat looked exactly how you'd expect a 20-something's flat to look. Beige walls that had seen better days, string lights that gave everything a soft glow, a chair in the corner draped with clothes she probably hadn't gotten around to folding. It wasn't spotless, but it wasn't chaotic either. Just lived in. Comfortable. She disappeared into the bathroom while I set my phone to charge on the nightstand. When she came back, she flopped into bed, scrolling TikTok, the screen lighting up her face in flashes of color. She laughed at something, then shoved the phone under her pillow. The room smelled faintly of perfume and detergent, that mix you get when sheets are freshly washed but someone's already slept in them once. We didn't say much. We were both too tired. I slid under the blanket beside her, and within minutes she was out. I don't know what time it was when I awoke. The room was silent. No noises from the street, no creaks from the flat above. I was just awake. One of those restless, half-conscious moments where you roll over, searching for a comfortable position. My hand slipped under her pillow. I expected the soft curve of a phone, maybe the cool edge of a charger. Instead, my fingers brushed against something long, hard, and cold. I froze. My first thought was a flashlight or maybe some weird bedside gadget. But when I adjusted my grip, my hand closed around a handle, a textured grip. A knife. Every nerve in my body lit up. I let go immediately, yanking my hand back as if the blade had burned me. I turned my head slowly. The faint glow of the string lights traced the shape under her pillow, unmistakably the outline of a blade. My heart pounded so loud I was sure it would wake her. She stirred, shifted slightly, but didn't open her eyes. I lay there rigid, forcing my breathing to stay even, pretending I was asleep. Minutes felt like hours. My brain screamed at me to move, to get up, but I couldn't. I didn't want to risk her waking and catching me in that panicked state. Somehow, eventually, exhaustion dragged me back under. Morning sunlight bled weakly through the curtains. She stretched beside me, yawning like nothing in the world was off. "Want coffee?" she asked casually. I nodded, trying to keep my voice steady. She slid out of bed, her oversized shirt swaying with her movements, and padded into the kitchen. I heard cupboards opening, the hiss of the kettle. Then she called back, "Gonna jump in the shower real quick while this heats up." The bathroom door shut. The sound of running water filled the flat. I stared at the pillow. At that spot I'd touched in the night. Curiosity warred with terror until curiosity won. My hand shook as I lifted the pillow. There it was. A large kitchen knife, blade dulled but still sharp enough to cut. The handle was worn smooth in places like it had been gripped often. My stomach tightened. People keep pepper spray by their bed. Baseball bats. But a knife under the pillow, that wasn't casual. That was intimate. I should have stopped there. Shoved the pillow back, left it alone. But my eyes caught something else. The mattress sagged oddly at one edge, dipping like weight had been applied unevenly. I leaned closer, slid my fingers between the mattress and the frame. Tape, thick, sticky tape. I tugged the sheet up. My chest went cold. Another knife. This one taped directly beneath the mattress, handle sticking out just enough for a quick grab. Two knives, both hidden within arm's reach. I staggered back from the bed, breath shallow. This wasn't paranoia. This was planning. Preparation. The shower still ran. My window of time was shrinking. I glanced at my shoes by the door, my jacket slung over the chair. If I tried to leave, she'd hear me. If she stepped out mid-escape and saw me standing there, shoes half on, jacket in hand, what would she think? Worse, what would she do? The water shut off. I scrambled back under the blanket, forcing my body into a relaxed sprawl, eyelids heavy, chest rising and falling like I'd been asleep all along. The bathroom door opened. She padded out, hair dripping, wrapped in a towel, humming lightly to herself. Her movements were casual, normal. She didn't notice the tension in my jaw or the stiffness in my posture. She got dressed, poured coffee, and sat across from me at the little dining table. We chatted about nothing, work, a TV show, plans for the weekend. My responses were automatic clipped. My eyes kept flicking to her hands, small, delicate hands curling around the mug, hands that could grip a knife handle just as easily. She offered to make breakfast. Eggs, toast, something simple. I forced a smile and shook my head. Told her I had an early thing to get to. She didn't pry, just shrugged, walked me to the door, and gave me a quick hug goodbye. The moment the door clicked shut behind me, I inhaled like I'd been drowning all night. The outside air hit me sharp, metallic in my lungs. I walked fast, then faster. By the time I reached the bus stop, I was nearly jogging. That afternoon, I considered texting her, asking about the knives. Maybe she was just scared, living alone in a rough area. Maybe it was nothing sinister. But my gut clenched at the thought of her answer. I could imagine it. A smiley face, a casual just in case, like it was no big deal. But I'd seen the tape, seen how the handle was positioned. That wasn't just in case. That was preparation, routine. Over the next week, she messaged a few times. I replied with short answers, excuses about being busy. Eventually, she stopped. I thought that would be the end of it. But sometimes lying awake at night, I picture that bed, the knife under the pillow, the second one taped under the mattress, and then the thought that makes my skin crawl. If those were the only two I found, how many more were hidden in that flat? I should have known something was off when he kept going on about his special cocktails. The first time he mentioned it, I thought he was just making conversation. Lots of people have little hobbies, and being into cocktails wasn't the strangest thing. But the way he talked about it, leaning forward, voice low, like he was letting me in on a secret, it felt less like a pastime and more like an obsession. He called himself an amateur mixologist, claimed he could make drinks better than any bar in town. I wasn't impressed. If anything, it sounded like a guy showing off. We hung out a few times before, nothing heavy. Coffee shops, short walks, casual conversations. He seemed fine. Maybe a little intense, but harmless. So when he invited me to his place one Friday night, I didn't think much of it. He lived in a cramped flat above a corner shop, the kind of place where you could hear every car that passed outside. The second I stepped in, I noticed how cluttered it was. Not dirty exactly, but cluttered in a way that felt purposeful. Bottles lined the counters, some half empty, some unlabeled. A shaker, syrups in mismatched jars, fruit slices on cutting boards, even little droppers filled with mysterious liquids. It looked less like a kitchen and more like a science project that had spilled into every available space. He grinned when he saw me looking. "This is where the magic happens," he said, gesturing dramatically at the bottles. "I've been perfecting a recipe. Something sweet, smooth, unforgettable. My signature." I laughed politely, but inside, something twisted in my stomach. I told him about my allergy weeks ago. Not casually, not in passing, seriously. Severe peanut allergy, always carry an EpiPen, could be fatal. He nodded back then, said he understood. I believed him. So when he slid a tall glass across the counter toward me, my pulse quickened. The liquid shimmered pinkish orange, foamy at the top. It looked harmless, pretty even. But the smell hit me first. Fruity, sure, but underneath was a nutty undertone that made my throat tighten. I pushed the glass gently back toward him. "I'm good with just a soda." He chuckled and nudged it closer. "Come on, just try it. I promise you'll love it." I shook my head. "No, really, I don't drink much anyway." His smile stretched wider, his eyes locked on mine. "It's harmless. You're overthinking." The way he said it sent a shiver through me. Like he wasn't just talking about the drink, he was testing me. I laughed awkwardly, tried to steer the conversation elsewhere, asked about his record collection stacked against the wall. He answered, but every couple of minutes, he tapped the glass and say something like, "It's going to waste just sitting there," or "You're serious and missing out." Each time I refused, his voice got sharper, less playful, more irritated. His knee bounced under the table, his jaw tightening when I didn't give in. The air in that little flat grew heavier by the minute. I felt like prey under a magnifying glass. Eventually, I stood up and walked across the room, pretending to examine his shelves just to put distance between us. He sighed dramatically, scooped up the glass, and dumped it in the sink. The clatter of ice against metal made me jump. He muttered something I couldn't catch, but I didn't ask him to repeat it. My chest was already tight, and not just from nerves. We put on a movie after that, or rather he did. I barely saw a frame. My eyes flicked to his every few seconds, watching the way he laughed at scenes that weren't funny, how his gaze slid toward me when he thought I wasn't looking. I counted minutes, waited until the film was almost done, then stretched like I was tired. I should head home, I said. Early morning tomorrow. He paused the movie instantly, too quickly. Yeah, sure. I grabbed my jacket and bag, forced a smile, and slipped out the door. The cold night air hit me like a wave. I walked fast, then faster, clutching my phone in my hand, thumb hovering over the emergency call button the whole way home. 2 days later, I was venting to a mutual friend over coffee. I told her the night had felt weird, how he wouldn't stop pushing that drink. She frowned, hesitant, and then told me something that made my stomach twist into knots. He'd bragged to her before about testing boundaries. Oh, how fun it was to push people just far enough to see what they'd do. And then she added, almost whispering, he once told me he slipped peanuts into a drink just to see if someone noticed. The blood drained from my face. Instantly, my mind snapped back to that cocktail, the fruity smell, that nutty undertone, the way he kept staring at me and waiting for me to take a sip. He knew exactly what he was doing. If I caved, even just a sip to shut him up, I could have been in an ambulance, or worse. That night, I blocked him everywhere. His number, his social media, even mutual connections where his name might pop up. I deleted every trace of him from my phone, like erasing him could erase the dread he left behind. But blocking doesn't erase memory. Sometimes when I lie awake at night, I replay that moment, his grin as he slid the glass toward me, his insistence, the gleam in his eyes when I refused. And what unsettles me most isn't even the drink itself. It's his smile when I said no. Not frustrated, not embarrassed, just patient, like he had all the time in the world to try again. It was supposed to be a simple dinner. Nothing fancy, just one of those midweek dates where you don't expect much. She picked the spot, a half-empty diner with buzzing neon lights above the windows, the kind that hum just loud enough to get under your skin. The conversation was average. Work, TV shows, how expensive everything was getting. She laughed at my jokes, asked all the right questions, and I thought she seemed normal enough. Maybe a little intense when she stared, her eyes holding mine longer than felt natural, but I figured it meant she was into me. When the bill came, I pulled out my wallet. She waved me off. I'll cover it. Least I can do, she said smoothly, like she'd been waiting for that moment. I thanked her and started putting on my jacket, ready to head to the bus stop. My place wasn't far, but she tilted her head, watching me. I'll drive you home, she said. I laughed lightly. Don't worry about it. It's just a few stops on the bus. She pressed again, firmer this time. It's late. I don't want you walking alone. It sounded thoughtful, harmless, so I gave in. Her car was immaculate inside, spotless in a way that almost felt unnatural. Not a single crumb, no stray receipts, not even dust on the dashboard. It smelled sharp like synthetic citrus, the kind that stings your nose instead of refreshing it. The seats were cool leather, the dashboard glowing with soft blue lights from buttons I didn't recognize. I buckled in, expecting a quick ride through familiar streets. At first, everything was fine. She kept the radio low, asked if I enjoyed dinner, joked about how bad the neon lighting was for selfies. I nodded along, relaxed until I realized she missed a turn. Hey, I said lightly, my street's back that way. She just smiled. I know a shortcut. I didn't press. People take different routes sometimes. But as we kept driving, the streets grew less familiar. The glow of shop fronts vanished. Houses thinned out. Soon we were passing warehouses, fences topped with barbed wire, and long stretches of empty road. Doesn't really look like a shortcut, I joked, though my throat was dry. Her hands gripped the wheel at 10 and 2. She didn't answer. The silence stretched. My chest tightened with each mile. I recognized nothing now, just industrial buildings, flickering lamps, and the occasional stray cat darting across the road. Finally she slowed, turned sharply into a massive, empty lot surrounded by shipping containers and factory shells. The car rolled across cracked concrete until we were dead center. She parked. Before I could speak, I heard it. Click. She locked the doors. The sound echoed in my head, louder than it should have been. My pulse spiked. I waited for her to laugh to say she was kidding. She didn't. Her hand stayed on the wheel, her eyes forward, her face blank. I shifted, reaching for the handle out of instinct. It didn't budge. Child lock. My voice came out tighter than I wanted. Why'd we stop? She tilted her head slowly, as if waiting whether to answer. Finally, she leaned back, folded her arms, and said, I just wanted to sit for a while. Her tone was calm. Too calm. The lot outside was dead silent. The windows fogged slightly from our breath. Every instinct screamed at me that something was wrong. Her gaze slid over to me, not smiling now, just watching, studying me like I was an experiment. My skin prickled under the weight of her stare. I shifted again, hand brushing my pocket where my phone sat. Her eyes darted down instantly. She caught the movement, lips twitching into the faintest smile. People are so glued to their phones, she murmured. I froze, leaving it there. Silence again. The steady hum of the engine filled the car, broken only by the thud of my heartbeat in my ears. Minutes passed. Maybe more. It felt endless. Then she reached forward and turned the key. The engine cut off. The dashboard lights went black. The lot sank into near darkness, the only glow from a single flickering lamppost in the distance. My chest constricted. Without the hum of the engine, it was just us and locked doors. She leaned closer, resting her arm casually on the steering wheel. Do you trust me? She asked. Her voice was soft, almost playful. My mouth went dry. I forced myself to nod. A lie. Anything to keep her calm. She studied me a moment longer, then leaned back, exhaled, turned the key again. The engine rumbled back to life. The dashboard lights returned, and with a casual flick of her finger, she unlocked the doors, like nothing had happened. We drove back in silence. She didn't say another word the whole way. No shortcut this time. Just straight to my street. When she stopped, she leaned across me and unlocked my door manually. The soft click made me jump. She waited, expectant, her blank expression unreadable. I mumbled a rushed thank you, scrambled out, and practically bolted into my building. I didn't breathe properly until the door was locked behind me and my back was pressed against it. Later that night, my phone buzzed. A message. Had fun tonight. Hope we can do it again sometime. That was all it said. I didn't reply. I deleted her number, her messages, everything. But sometimes when I drive past empty lots or industrial estates, the memory slams back. The smell of fake citrus, the silence of that car, the sound of those locks clicking shut, and the way she just sat there staring, waiting. The third date was supposed to feel easy. By that point, you kind of know whether you're into someone. I thought it was. He picked the spot. A fancy rooftop bar where the menus didn't list prices and the staff looked at you like they already knew your order. The kind of place that glowed with glass walls and city lights. Music so soft it barely existed. He was already there when I arrived, leaning back in his chair like he owned the place. He stood up, smiled, pulled out my chair. Small gestures, but deliberate. I felt underdressed in my simple black dress, but he didn't comment. He complimented me anyway, his tone smooth, practiced. Drinks came fast. Expensive cocktails with sugared rims, things floating inside them I couldn't name. He ordered for me without asking, saying I'd love it. I let him. He talked a lot, mostly about himself, his travels, his work, stories that felt polished, like he'd told them before. I half listened, nodding, more distracted by the view of the city below. It was the kind of place you didn't stumble into by chance. After a while, I excused myself to the bathroom. It was as fancy as the bar, marble sinks, folded cloth towels instead of paper, lighting soft enough to make everyone look flawless. I checked my reflection, fixed my hair, washed my hands slowly. Just ordinary things. When I came back, everything had changed. He was gone. The chair was tucked neatly under the table, his glass empty, no jacket draped across the back. For a moment, I thought maybe he'd gone to the bathroom too. But then I saw it. A key card. It sat where my glass had been. Plain white inside a folded sleeve with a number written on it. And my name, my full name, printed neatly on the front. My stomach dropped. I hadn't told him my last name, not once, not even on the app. I picked it up with shaking hands. The logo on the sleeve belonged to a hotel a few blocks from the bar. The number scrawled in thick black ink matched the room. I looked around, scanning faces, half expecting him to appear from the crowd with a smirk. He didn't. It was like he vanished into thin air. The bar carried on around me, people laughing, glasses clinking. But I felt suddenly exposed, like I was under a spotlight and everyone could see my confusion. My name on that card burned in my head. I thought about leaving it, pretending I never saw it. But the fact my name was printed there, as if the card was waiting specifically for me, made it impossible to ignore. My chest tightened with the realization. This wasn't spontaneous. This was planned. I slipped the card into my bag, stood up on trembling legs, and walked out. The doorman smiled as I passed, oblivious to the panic tightening my steps. Outside, the night air felt sharper, colder. The hotel was close. Too close. My body screamed to go home, but my feet carried me there anyway. Curiosity mixed with dread, dragging me forward. I had to know. The lobby was sleek and hushed, polished floors reflecting soft light. People moved quietly, purposeful, like everyone already belonged. I gripped the card tight and walked past the desk without making eye contact, pretending I knew exactly where I was going. The elevator ride stretched forever. Each floor dinged in slow succession, my reflection in the mirrored wall pale, wide-eyed. When it stopped at the right floor, I stepped into a hallway that seemed to go on endlessly, carpet swallowing every footstep. The number was at the very end. I stopped in front of it, heart pounding. The key card was slick with sweat in my hand. I hesitated. Everything in me screamed to throw it away. But some invisible thread tugged me forward. I pressed it against the lock. The light blinked green. The door clicked open. I didn't step inside. Not fully. Something deep in my gut warned me, but I leaned just enough to see. The room was dark, curtains drawn, but shapes stood out in the shadows. A bag on the bed, not mine. A man's bag. Shoes lined neatly by the dresser. Someone had already claimed the room. My breath caught. I pulled back instantly, heart hammering so loud I was sure it would echo down the hall. I didn't need to see more. I didn't want to. I backed away, careful not to let the door slam, and turned. Then I ran. The elevator felt impossibly slow, so I hit the stairs, rushing flight after flight until I burst out onto the street, lungs heaving. The city lights that once looked magical from the rooftop now glared cold and sharp. I didn't stop walking until I was several blocks away, blending into crowds, forcing my legs to keep moving even though they shook with every step. Later that night, my phone buzzed. A message. You should have gone inside. My skin turned to ice. I didn't reply. I blocked his number instantly, deleted everything. Texts, calls, the app we met on. Every trace of him gone. But that message etched itself into my mind, looping endlessly. You should have gone inside. Who was waiting for me in that room? What would have happened if I'd crossed the threshold instead of pulling back? And worst of all, how did he know my name? I wasn't the type to Google people after a first date. It always felt nosy, like crossing the line before someone even had a chance to share their story. But after a few dates with her, I couldn't shake this weird itch in the back of my head. She was perfect. Too perfect. She always had the right answer, the clever remark, the well-timed laugh. She never stumbled over her words, never said, or I don't know. Every story she told sounded like it had been rehearsed in front of a mirror. I liked her, don't get me wrong. She was funny, charming, and impossibly easy to be around, but her polish nagged at me. We'd been out 3 times. Drinks, dinner, a couple of late-night walks. Each time I left smiling. Each time I also left thinking, who is she really? Because for all of her perfect stories, there were holes. Big ones. She never mentioned friends. Never mentioned family. Never once said where she grew up. Whenever I asked, she'd redirect with a question about me. Smoothly, almost invisibly, like it was part of the choreography. After our 3rd date, when she left my place with that little wave and smile, I sat at my desk and opened my laptop. Just curiosity, I told myself, just to settle my mind. I typed her first and last name into Google. I didn't expect much. A LinkedIn page, maybe a stray tagged photo. What came up knocked the air out of me. The first result was a dating profile. Not on the app we met on, a different site, one I'd never even heard of. And there she was, her photo right at the top. Same picture she'd used with me. Soft lighting, her chin tilted just slightly, That perfect smile. But the name was different. And so was the age. It said she was 28. She told me she was 24. My stomach twisted. Maybe it was old, I thought. Maybe she lied about her age on that site for some reason. I wanted to believe that, but then I scrolled further. Another site. Another profile. Same face. Different name. This time she was 31. I clicked it open, heart racing. The bio was different. New hobbies, new job. This one said she was in marketing. The first one had said she was a teacher. My palms were sweating, but I couldn't stop. A third profile. Another name. 26 this time. Studying law. A fourth. 32. Corporate recruiter. By the fifth profile, my breath had gone shallow. They all used the same handful of photos, recycled and cropped, sometimes flipped. Always her face. Always that precise smile. I told myself maybe someone was stealing her pictures. People did that, right? Catfishing. Maybe she was a victim. But the more I looked, the less it felt like theft. Some of the profiles had recent updates, little online now indicators glowing green. And the details, that's what chilled me. Favorite drinks, favorite movies, even a line about hating early mornings. Things she told me on our dates, word for word. This wasn't someone else using her face. This was her. Creating versions of herself, dozens of them, scattered across the internet like shattered glass. It felt like I'd stumbled into a hall of mirrors, each reflection slightly warped. Emma, Claire, Hannah, Sophie. 23, 28, 32. A teacher, a lawyer, a marketer. Different names, different lives, but always the same face staring back at me. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw those duplicate profiles multiplying, 1,000 copies of her scattered through the dark. The next day, I met her for coffee. She looked the same as always, casual hoodie, hair tied back, that easy smile like nothing in the world was wrong. She slid into the booth across from me, asked how my week was going. I nodded, answered automatically, but my mind was somewhere else entirely. Every word she spoke sounded scripted, like I was reading lines from a play I'd already skimmed online. She noticed. She tilted her head, asked if I was okay. I lied, said I was tired. She reached across the table, touched my hand. Her skin was warm, grounding, but it only made me feel worse. That same practiced tenderness, like she was selling me on her version again. When she excused herself to the bathroom, I pulled out my phone. Opened one of the profiles I'd bookmarked. The one where she was Claire, 28, living 2 neighborhoods over. The app said she'd been active an hour ago, right around when we sat down. That's when the weight of it sank in. She wasn't juggling a couple of lies. She was juggling entire lives. Switching names like changing clothes. She came back to the table smiling, sipping her coffee like nothing had happened. Like she hadn't just been logged in under a different identity minutes before. I didn't confront her. I didn't ask. We finished our drinks. I forced a smile. I walked her to the station. We kissed goodbye like everything was normal. But inside, everything had shifted. The next morning, I blocked her. Every app, every number, every platform. Wiped her clean from my phone. It felt like scrubbing off a stain that wouldn't quite disappear. I thought that would be the end of it. But a week later, a notification buzzed on my phone. A new profile on the same dating app where we first met. Different name again. Different age. Same photo. Her photo. I stared at it, thumb hovering over the screen. She hadn't vanished. She just rotated to another version, another identity, another mask. I never swiped right. I deleted the app entirely. But sometimes I wonder how many others are out there sitting across from her at coffee shops, convinced they'd met someone perfect, while she's spinning 20 more names, 20 more stories. And I wonder which version of her I knew, if any. The second date isn't supposed to feel serious. Usually it's still the testing stage. Dinner, drinks, maybe a movie, something low pressure. So when he told me he had a surprise for our second date, I figured it'd be a quirky spot to eat or maybe some hidden bar if he wanted to show off. I didn't expect what I got. He picked me up outside my flat. He was dressed a little sharper than the first time I'd seen him. Button-up shirt, polished shoes, hair slicked like he'd actually taken time with it. I joked that I was underdressed. He just smiled and said not to worry, that it was special. We drove for a while out of the city, in quieter streets where the houses got bigger. I asked once where we were going. He just said, "You'll see." When we pulled into a long driveway, my stomach flipped. A big white house, lights glowing in every window, cars lined up outside. It looked like someone was hosting a party. I asked if this was a family thing. He nodded, grinning like a kid, said he thought it'd be nice for me to meet everyone. It was only our second date. I laughed nervously, but he was already out of the car, opening my door like it was settled. Walking up the porch, I heard voices inside, not casual chatter, but organized, almost rehearsed. The second the front door opened, I froze. His entire family was waiting, and they were dressed in wedding clothes. I mean full suits, ties, dresses, his mom in a pale gown, his dad in a tux, even little flower crowns and the kids running around. The dining room behind them was set like a reception. Long table, white tablecloth, candles, bouquets of flowers at each end. My throat closed up. For a second, I thought maybe it was an actual wedding and he dragged me along by mistake. But no one else looked confused. They were all staring right at me, smiling. His mom rushed forward first, clutching my hands, calling me beautiful. She pulled me into the house like she'd been waiting all day. His dad followed, shaking my hand firmly, telling me it was a big night. People clapped when I stepped into the living room like I'd just walked down an aisle. I looked at him, hoping for an explanation. He just smiled wider, put his arm around me, and guided me deeper inside. The table was already set with food. Roasted chicken, potatoes, wine bottles opened and breathing. Every seat taken except one, right beside him at the head. They'd been saving it for me. I sat stiff, trying to play along, telling myself maybe this was just their sense of humor. A weird family joke. But the longer it went on, the less funny it felt. His aunt leaned over, asking if I was ready for a lifetime of happiness. His cousin raised a glass, calling me the one. His grandmother dabbed her eyes like she was holding back tears. I picked at the food but couldn't eat. My hands shook every time I lifted my fork. Halfway through, his dad stood up to give a toast. He went on about how love was rare, how family was everything, how tonight was the start of something bigger than all of us. Everyone nodded, smiling, clinking glasses. I kept glancing at the door, calculating how quickly I could excuse myself without looking insane. After dinner, they'd brought out a cake. A full layered cake, white frosting, tiny flowers decorating the edges, and right in the middle in red icing were both our names. Mine. His. I nearly dropped my plate. I whispered to him, asking what this was. He leaned close, eyes shining, and said it was tradition. That his family always celebrated like this when someone brought home the future. The word future rattled in my head. I'd only known him for a couple of weeks. I excused myself to the bathroom, heart pounding. In the hallway, I saw framed photos. All of him. School photos, graduations, family trips. But mixed in were pictures with other women. Different women. Each one smiling beside him, standing with his family. And in every photo, they all wore the same wedding attire. My skin crawled. I stared at those pictures, each one replaced like they'd been edited out of his life and filed away neatly. I locked myself in the bathroom for a few minutes, trying to breathe, trying to figure out what to do. Leaving through the front door felt impossible. They'd all see me. So I waited, listening to the muffled laughter through the walls until I worked up the nerve. When I came out, everyone was gathered in the living room, raising glasses, music playing softly. I slipped past them, mumbling something about needing air. Nobody stopped me. Not even him. The second I hit the porch, I ran. Down the driveway, past the parked cars, onto the street where the streetlights finally broke the darkness. I ordered a cab from my phone and didn't look back until I was safely inside, speeding away. Later that night, my phone buzzed. A text from him. It said he was sorry if it was too much too soon, but that his family loved me already. I blocked his number. But I still think about those photos. How many girls had sat where I sat, smiled for those pictures, eaten from that same table, and how none of them were there now. The thing about bars is you never notice the background until you try to focus on one person. Music thumps, glasses clink, people yell because they can't be heard over each other. That night, I wasn't paying attention to any of it. I was locked on her. It was only our second time hanging out, but she felt different from the usual dates. Confident, order first, Asked questions later confident. She didn't skim the menu. She told the bartender exactly what she wanted, no hesitation. I like that. It read as decisive, a quality I was into. We grabbed a corner booth. I ordered a simple whiskey, neat, because I would do gimmicks. She teased me for being plain and leaned across the table to tell me about her day, voice low and direct. When she laughed for real, like something that started small and rolled into itself. At one point, I glanced up the screen above the bar. A game was playing. I caught a score update, maybe 2 seconds. I looked back down and my glass was gone. I blinked. The whiskey wasn't there. The napkin was folded where it had been, the coaster empty. She was smiling, lips stained slightly red from whatever she'd been drinking. "Don't worry," she said, bright as a bell. "I finished it for you." Her tone was playful, but I felt that tug of something off, like a joke that was a little sharp at the edges. Maybe I'd put my glass down wrong and she'd cleared it, I told myself. I laughed it off and signaled the bartender for another. She waved at me, insisting she handle it. "Let me get you something better," she said, and ordered another round without leaving her seat. The new glass came back full, and she pushed it toward me with both hands like it was a present. I took a sip to be polite, and the world slid. It wasn't the warm, burny lift of alcohol. It was cotton and velvet at the same time. My head felt muffled as if wrapped in a blanket, but the blanket vibrated. My tongue felt thick, my vision softened at the edges. Sounds folded together into a pressure. The music got louder. The lights seemed to tilt into my eyes. She watched like someone watching a plant grow. Not alarmed, not worried. Just watching, patient, precise, as if she was waiting to see how long it would take. I set the glass down too hard. My hands trembled. I said, then swallowed and looked for the bathroom. "I need the restroom." My voice sounded wrong to me far away. She kept her hand on the table, and then, when I stood, she reached across and covered mine. Her grip was steady. Too steady. "Take your time," she said, and there was a softness there that felt rehearsed. In the mirror over the sink, I looked like someone else. Pale, pupils blown wide, sweat on my temple. I splashed water on my face, clung to the porcelain to stop myself from swaying. My heartbeat was a drum against the back of my teeth. I breathed in cool, hard air like it was medicine. When I staggered back to the booth, she was gone. My glass was empty again. Panic climbed up my throat and lodged behind my sternum. I scanned the bar. Crowds, laughter, the bartender in motion. No sign of her slipping out a back door. I checked the exits. People flowed in and out like normal. No sudden rush, no argument. It was like she had been erased. I made it to the bar and leaned on it like a man who'd been in a fight. "I'm not feeling great," I told the bartender, voice low. "Did you see the woman who was sitting across from me? Blonde, red lipstick." He frowned, wiping a glass. "I didn't notice anyone leave," he said. "You were closed out already. Cash." He glanced at the screen, squinted, then frowned. "Someone paid your tab in cash. Said they'd take care of you tonight." My skin crawled. "Who?" I asked. He shrugged. "No name on the receipt." He handed me a glass of water without asking, and I drank like it was a life raft. Outside, the night air hit my face and the spinning eased. Cars went by. A couple laughed as they passed. I sat on the curb and put my head in my hands, counting my breaths like a meditation. My phone was warm because my thumb had been hovering over it, partly to call someone, partly to record anything that would make this less intangible. When the world steadied enough to move, I called a rideshare and went home. Sleep came in small fits, each one punctuated by the memory of her watching me with the flatness of someone who'd done this before. The next morning, my head felt like it had been used as a drum. Mouth like old cotton. Messages waited in my phone, one from an unknown number, timestamped at 2:17 a.m., 8 words. "You drink too slow." I didn't open it more than once. I deleted the message and blocked the number. I changed my passwords and told a friend what had happened, trying to keep my voice normal. He put a hand on my shoulder and said I should probably go to urgent care, that what I described sounded like someone had slipped something into my drink. He was right, and I should have, but the thought of more tests, more questions, felt like another breach. I kept my head down and waited for the fog to leave. For a while after that, I avoided the bar. I avoided the street the bar was on. But weirdly, I kept thinking about her smile, the calm, patient way she watched me. Not an expression of malice so much as clinical curiosity, like a scientist logging results after a trial. I never saw her again. I blocked and deleted and told myself it ended there. But once every few weeks, my phone buzzes with a notification I don't open. A new unknown number, or an old username surfacing on some app I barely use. I always delete, I always block, but the idea isn't gone. It sits in the back of me, a small, steady ache, that she knew exactly how long it would take, that she timed it, tested it, measured my reaction, and then, when the data were in, walked away. Sometimes when I pass the bar, the crowd blurs into film grain, and for an instant she's there in the corner booth, watching. Calm. Patient. Waiting for someone else to drink too slow. I didn't think much of turning him down. We only been out once. A dinner that was pleasant enough but didn't spark anything. He wasn't overtly rude, just off. He stared a little too long, held my gaze like he was trying to file my face away, leaned in like he wanted to memorize my mouth. I sent a polite text the next morning, thanks, but I don't think we clicked. He left it on read. That should have been the end. 2 days later, my phone started acting weird. The battery, which had always lasted me through a day, began dropping like it was being punished. Apps lagged. Bluetooth pop-ups blinked at me like small white warnings. I blamed it on the phone. It was a year old, stubborn like that. But the glitches happened again and again, and always when I left my flat. A coincidence gnawed at me. One night I was over at Claire's place. She's our group's resident tech person, the one everyone brings their broken gadgets to. I went to her complaining more to get reassurance than to fix anything. I tossed my purse on the coffee table and handed her the phone. It drains like crazy, I said. And my Bluetooth keeps popping up with nonsense. She swiped through my settings, tapping and frowning. Do you recognize a device called Tracker 200? She asked. I stared at the phone. No, I don't even. She told me to empty my bag. My fingers were clumsy suddenly, tipping wallets, lipsticks, receipts onto the table. Claire worked fast, her movements calm and practiced. She peeled open the inner lining of the purse's main pocket, and without a word, pulled out a white disc the size of a coin. My stomach dropped at the sight of it. A tracker, a tiny spy with a plastic face. It's broadcasting, Claire said, and the word sounded clinical and final. Active. Someone can see your location. How did it get in there? The question was small and stupid sounding in my own ears. I replayed the week like a video on repeat. The only time the purse had been out of my sight was on the date. I draped it over the back of my chair while I popped into the bathroom. He'd stayed at the table the entire time. I swallowed. He could have slipped it in when I left my bag, I said. Claire didn't blow it off or laugh. She looked at me in that way that makes your skin feel thin, like she'd already calculated the worst. You should turn your phone off, but keep the tracker, she said. We'll make a copy of the signal. It might help if you want to find out where it's pinging from. On the walk home, the city looked wrong. Lights seemed too bright, shadows too patient. Every reflective surface might have been a pair of eyes. I checked mirrors and windows more times than felt sane. I kept reaching for my phone and then pulling my hand back, not wanting to see another line of code or a notification I couldn't unring. The next week, my nerves unraveled in slow public waves. At the grocery store, a man lingered too long by the entrance. At the bus stop, someone's hood dipped like a curtain. I caught glimpses of faces out of the corner of my eye and turned my head on reflex. Nothing concrete. Nothing I could point to and say, there he is. Just a feeling like static under my skin. Then the messages began. Unknown numbers, short and precise. Nice jacket, new haircut. Hope you liked dinner last night. Dinner. I hadn't been out. I hadn't changed my hair. My fingers hovered over the reply box, then recoiled. Responding felt like opening a trapdoor. So I didn't. I screenshot the messages and sent them to Claire. He's watching me, I wrote. Her reply was swift. Change everything. Bags, routes, locks. I did. I started carrying a different bag every day, emptied and checked new ones for seams and ridges like they were contraband. I switched train times and walked to different streets. I changed the locks on my front door, twice, even though my landlord grumbled. I stopped going to my favorite cafe, the one with the barista who remembered my name. Small acts of defiance that felt absurdly like safety measures. The texts never stopped. Mostly short phrases, sometimes observations that only someone close enough to glimpse personal detail would know. You missed your bus. You left your coffee black. You said you loved that band. The proximity implied in them, the fact that he could see my life, was the part that hollowed me the most. Each message tightened a coil inside me until I moved through my days like an animal in a trap. I canceled a dinner with friends because my chest felt like a fist. I told my mother I was tired when she asked why I sounded rushed. I kept my head down at work and skipped happy hours. In small private ways, I rewired my life around avoiding detection. 1 week after the tracker was found, a final message came. No words, just an address, a strip of numbers and street that meant nothing to me when I stared at it in the harsh light of my kitchen table. My hands were steady as I deleted it. My heart thudded like it wanted to outpace my actions. I blocked the number. I threw the phone face down on the couch and left the room as if retreating from an animal made it less dangerous. The tracker Claire had found disappeared into her drawer. She turned it off and taken it to a friend who knew people, maybe to see who'd bought it or where it had pinged. I wanted that kind of closure to point a name at the thing that had watched me, but the police were slow, and my story felt small in a city full of noise. They filed a report and gave me the bureaucracy of forms and a case number like a talisman to hold when I slept. Now, before I leave the house, I check my bag twice. I lock the door behind me and watch the hallway for a beat before I step out. I tell myself it's just caution. I tell myself I'm not letting him win. But part of me knows I have been changed. The simple act of carrying a purse is never quite the same when you know someone may have put a tiny eye inside it and then walked away. She told me she'd just moved into her new place and invited me over. It sounded casual, a come see my place kind of invite that feels like the next natural step. I didn't think much of it. Everyone's place looks a bit weird the first week. Boxes stacked in corners, a few mismatched plates, a couch with a blanket thrown over it because the cat or the delivery hasn't arrived yet. The building had one of those buzzer panels with peeling numbers. She came down smiling, jangling keys like she could barely wait to show me around. We climbed the narrow staircase together. It creaked under our feet in a way that made the air feel older than it should. When she unlocked the door, I expected the jagged chaos of a new move. Half unpacked boxes, scuffed floors, pizza cartons. Instead, I stepped into a quiet so total it felt deliberate. The apartment was empty. Not moving in empty. Not the kind with a few boxes and a mismatched lamp. Empty like someone had unmade the idea of home and left only its shell. Bare walls, no frames, no hooks, no bookshelf pretending to be a coffee table. The only thing that looked used was the mattress on the floor pushed against the far wall, a pale rectangle with a single thin blanket. Beside it sat a duffel bag, unzipped enough to breathe but closed enough that whatever was inside wasn't immediately obvious. The air smelled like disinfectant and dust. It had that clinical note to it, the kind you get after someone tries too hard to make a place look new. Her voice was bright as she waved me in. I haven't had time to actually unpack, she said, breezy. It's been a crazy week. She said the words like a practiced explanation. I wanted to believe her. I wanted to laugh and make a joke about terrible landlords and missing furniture. Instead, I hung back in the doorway, eyes fixed on the duffel. It sat oddly, too straight-edged, like something rigid and heavy was pressing against the canvas. She kicked off her shoes and clapped her hands as if announcing a party of one. Make yourself at home, she said, patting the mattress. It's easier to just sit. Her smile didn't reach something in her eyes, though. There was a quickness to her movements, a small tension under the cheerfulness. I stayed standing. I told myself it was fine, that people lived differently, that maybe she was minimalist by choice. She moved around with the practiced ease of someone who knew where everything was, offering me water. Pointing to where my jacket could go, I said I'd just look around. Lied, but anything to have a reason to keep my feet moving. That's when I saw the bedroom door. It was bolted on the outside. Not the little latch you flip when you're inside. A heavy industrial bolt, new metal, screws still shiny, fastened to the doorframe on the hallway side. It looked like something you'd find in a storage unit or a workshop. My mouth went dry. I imagined a landlord's joke, a contractor's weird finish, or an emergency retrofit. Maybe it was for the fridge? That made no sense. The bolt's shadow cut a dark line under the frame like a mouth waiting to close. She laughed when she caught me staring. Oh, yeah, she said, casual as a weather report. The landlord's paranoid. He installed that after someone kicked their door down a few years ago. Her tone was airy, like she'd read that line in a manual and used it before. Says it keeps out squatters. She shrugged and sat on the mattress, patting the spot next to her. I sat because I didn't know what else to do. My legs felt like they'd lost their wiring. The duffel sat between us, a dark presence. Every time she shifted, I thought the zipper might string and show me something horrible. A rope, a strange bundle, a hint that the mattress wasn't just a sleeping surface. We made small talk. I asked about her move. She told me about the broker and the strange clause in the lease and how the neighbors were quiet. She asked me about my work, my family. Her questions were warm but oddly precise, the kind you'd ask when you want to catalog someone more than converse. Her laugh was soft. It slipped into comfortable places and settled. When she excused herself to use the bathroom, I moved closer to the duffel like gravity pulled me. My hand hovered over the zipper. For half a second, I imagined everything that could be in there, each possibility worse than the last. My fingers itched to look. My brain screamed not to. I pulled my hand back like I'd been burned. Instead, I wandered to the window. It opened onto a narrow alley, brick walls rising on either side. No fire escape, no ladder, nothing you could use to leave if the door was blocked. Below, dumpsters crouched like waiting animals. The reality of the space closed around me. If something happened inside, there was nowhere obvious to go. She came out of the bathroom smiling, but the smile thinned when she noticed me watching the duffel. Her eyes flicked to it, just for a second, quick as a blink, enough to tell me she knew how I'd reacted. She didn't say anything. She just poured 2 glasses of water and sat back down. I tried to laugh, tried to make a joke about my curiosity. It felt ridiculous in the hollow light of the room. I sipped my water and watched the zipper breathe. Then my gaze landed on the floor by the mattress and I saw it, another lock. Same model as the bolt on the door, shiny new, lying there like a spare part. That was a tipping point. It wasn't a homeowner's afterthought anymore or the landlord's eccentricity. A lock on the door and a spare lock on the floor suggested intention. Intent doesn't shrug off as easily as discomfort. My throat tightened. I told her I remembered something I had to do. She frowned, an expression that perched on her face, then slid off. "Stay a bit longer?" she asked, but she didn't reach for me. She watched with the same even, clinical curiosity I'd seen before. I didn't wait for permission. I shoved my shoes on, grabbed my jacket, and opened the door. The hallway hit me like a lungful of cold air. It felt safer by virtue of being public. I practically ran down the narrow stairwell, 2 steps at a time, and burst out onto the street where the city swallowed me in its noise. Only then did my breath come. The street lamp buzzed. A car went past. I leaned against a brick wall and let my shoulders sag like some small animal allowed itself to relax. That night I scrolled through my phone and replayed every oddity. The disinfectant smell, the duffel's unnatural stiffness, the spare lock. Each detail settled like a pebble in my chest. I blocked her number the next morning because it felt like the only action I could take that was both sensible and final. But the image of that spare lock sits with me. I keep thinking about what it was for. A storage closet? A pet? A piece of furniture waiting to be assembled. My mind keeps returning to one darker possibility, that it wasn't meant for anything she owned. What if the bolt wasn't about keeping people out at all? What if it was about making sure something or someone stayed in? Sometimes my hands still go cold when I think about that zipper, the way the canvas bulged slightly. Sometimes I imagine the lock's metal teeth biting into the frame, closing on a night where I hadn't remembered something I had to do. And sometimes in the quiet of my apartment, I hear the echo of her laugh, casual and practiced, and I wonder how close I came to finding out what was inside that duffel. If that lock had been meant for me, I tell myself I would never have known until it was too late. The night started off ordinary enough. He invited me over after dinner, said his roommates were out for the weekend, and we could hang without interruptions. I didn't think twice. These are the kinds of simple, quiet firsts people always talk about. I pictured a messy living room, a fridge full of takeout boxes, maybe a dog barking at the mailman. Nothing cinematic. His house looked like any other on a quiet street, a porch light that flickered in the same short rhythm as the neighbors, blinds pulled tight so you could only see vague rectangles of light from outside. Inside, he apologized for the mess like he'd said it 100 times. There was a sagging couch whose cushions had given up, a TV balanced on a crate, pizza boxes flattened into neat stacks. It felt lived in, forgivingly so. We watched something half funny and half cheesy, ate junk food. At some point he led me upstairs. His room was tucked into a corner. Posters tacked to the wall, clothes spilling out of a half-open dresser, that lived in clutter that reads as comfortable. We crashed after midnight. I was half asleep, his arm across my waist, that pleasant numbness that follows late-night snacks and one too many laughs. The house hummed around us. Then I woke. It wasn't a single sharp noise. It was a pressure in the air, a heaviness that made the room feel smaller. Then I heard whispering. It was faint, at first just a shape of sound, barely a breath. But as I focused, the whispers resolved into words, or maybe fragments of words, and they were coming from below us. I sat up slowly. He was still asleep, face slack, breathing even. I slipped out of bed with my feet sinking into the carpet and moved toward the door. The whispering grew clearer the closer I got to the stairs, a low, urgent murmur, like people had pressed their mouths together to speak secrets into the dark. There was no laughter, no clatter of beer bottles, no dialogue that meant anything ordinary. It was a steady woven sound made up of many voices, overlapping and urgent. I paused at the top of the staircase. I didn't even know his house had a basement until that moment. The door was tucked next to the kitchen, an unassuming slab with an old brass handle. A thin band of pale light slid out from under it, and the whispers swelled. They weren't talking to each other. They sounded like they were speaking together to someone or something beneath an agreed breath. My hand hovered over the wood, skin prickling. Curiosity pushed me forward. I pressed my ear to the door. The sound punched through me like cold water. Dozens of voices, maybe more, layered over one another in a frantic, hushed tide. Some syllables dove short and sharp, others elongated like someone pulling on string. There was a cadence to it, a rhythm that pulled at your chest. It didn't sound like normal conversation. It sounded like ritual. I stumbled back, heart slamming. That was when the voices stopped. They cut off, mid-phrase, and the silence that followed was loud enough to hurt. It felt as if the house was holding its breath. For a second I thought my ears were lying, that the noise was some trick. Then I heard movement. Footsteps on concrete below, slow and deliberate. Something shuffled like a heavy object dragged, then the faint scratch of something metal. I darted back up the stairs, slipping into the bed and pulling the blanket over me before his breathing changed. He rolled over, murmured something, then sank back into sleep. I lay perfectly still, every nerve on fire, watching the ceiling and listening for any sound. The house gave me nothing but the steady domestic noises, a fridge motor, the distant car outside, and the echo of my own pulse. Minutes felt like hours. I told myself it was imaginary, that my brain had amplified normal house sounds into something sinister. Maybe his roommates had come back quietly. Maybe they'd been holding an all-night poker thing in the basement. But the tone of what I heard didn't match casual laughter or card shuffling. It had weight and tension. It had a tightness that made my gut flip. Eventually, I dozed, but the dream that folded over me was a single repeating image. A dozen pale faces looking up from concrete, mouths moving in unison. In the morning, he was bright and oblivious. He made coffee, asked if I'd slept okay. I lied. Fine, I said, folding my voice into normal. I told myself a mundane answer would flatten the night's oddness like steam on a window. Then, as I reached for my bag from the chair in the corner, I saw it, a smear of gray dust along the strap near the buckle. A thin line of grit that hadn't been there when I'd sat down. It clung to the fabric in a way that suggested it had been rubbed there, transferred, not accidental. It looked exactly like the kind of dust that gathers on basement concrete, dry, gritty, stubborn. I hadn't gone downstairs. I hadn't left the upstairs hallway. My fingers trembled as I brushed at the smear. It left a faint streak on my skin. I felt foolish and small, imagined the smear fading into nothing. I looked away. But the smear stayed, a quiet proof. He kissed me goodbye at the door, all easy smiles, not noticing my hands. Text me when you get home, he said. I nodded, but my voice felt far away. The street tasted like relief when I stepped out. The city noise brought oxygen back into my lungs. I walked fast, not running, and only allowed my breath to slow once I crossed my building's threshold and locked my door behind me. That night, the whispering returned in my dreams and clung to my waking hours. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the basement door slit of light and heard the silence that followed the voices, like the hush after everyone in a room is told to be still. I checked my bag again and again, looking for something I didn't understand. The gray dust would not leave my fingers. I never asked him about the basement. I never returned to his house. I don't know what lies below that floor, what voices have learned to whisper together there, or what walks up the stairs once the light slips under a door. I only know the smear on my strap and the way the house felt when the voices stopped, like a secret that knew it had been heard. And sometimes when I lie awake at night, I can still hear the echo of those whispers in the dark, low, patient, as if waiting for someone to open that door again. She had this effortless charm that hooked me right away. On our first date, she laughed at all the right spots, asked the kind of questions that made me feel interesting, even reached across the table to adjust the cuff of my sleeve like we'd known each other longer than a week. It wasn't forced. It wasn't fake. It was light and easy, the kind of date that makes you look forward to the next one. So when she invited me over for the second, I didn't hesitate. She said she wanted to cook, that her mom might be around but wouldn't bother us. I thought nothing of it. Plenty of people lived with their parents to save money. I imagined a busy kitchen, some clatter of dishes, maybe her mom popping in to say hello before retreating. Harmless. The house looked normal from the street, if not a little too well kept. A small two-story with lace curtains and a front garden that looked manicured, almost staged. Roses pruned too perfectly, hedges cut into sharp corners. I rang the bell. She opened the door quickly, like she'd been waiting by it. She smiled, but her eyes flicked past me, scanning the street. For what, I didn't know. Inside, the living room looked like a time capsule. Doilies on the arms of every chair. Glass figurines lined up on shelves, each in perfect symmetry. The carpet was spotless. The air smelled faintly of potpourri and something simmering, beef, maybe, with herbs that seemed too sharp, too strong. I made a comment about the place being cozy. She smiled again, but it didn't reach her eyes. The dining table was already set, plates arranged precisely, silverware gleaming like it had been polished that afternoon. She moved quietly around the table, serving food with these practiced motions, like she wasn't cooking for me specifically, but repeating a routine. I tried making small talk. She kept her answers short, polite, almost rehearsed. Then her mother walked in. She was dressed too formally for dinner at home. A blouse buttoned to the throat, skirt pressed sharp, hair pinned back so tightly it seemed to stretch her skin. Her eyes were sharp, calculating, and the way she sat across from me felt deliberate like a chess move. She didn't introduce herself. She didn't smile. She just folded her hands and studied me like I was a document under review. The silence stretched, long enough that I nearly spoke just to fill it. Then she began. Not with pleasantries, not about dinner or how her daughter and I met. She went straight into marriage. She asked where I worked, how much I earned, whether my family owned property. The questions came clipped and direct, as if she'd memorized them from a checklist. At first, I thought she was joking, a protective mother trying to scare me. I laughed nervously, waiting for her to smile, maybe lean back and wave it off. She didn't. She leaned closer, eyes fixed on me, and pressed for specifics. Her daughter sat silently beside me, staring at her plate. She didn't protest, didn't look embarrassed. She didn't even move her fork. Just sat still, shoulders tight, as if she'd been through this before. The air got heavier with each question. The mother wanted to know about children, how many I planned on having, what religion they'd be raised in, how soon they'd be expected. She asked if I believed in living with extended family, if I understood the responsibilities of being head of a household. She spoke like this was all decided, like dinner was just the formal signing of an agreement. I glanced at the daughter, hoping for a grin, a roll of the eyes, something to show she thought this was ridiculous too. Nothing. Her face was blank, her fork untouched. The mother continued, listing conditions with the precision of a lawyer. No living together before marriage, no traveling without approval. I would be expected to provide, but she would retain a say in household matters. Family comes first, she said flatly, and I am family. My throat tightened. I barely touched my food, pushing vegetables around the plate while her eyes tracked my every move. At one point, I tried to laugh it off. I mumbled something about this being a little fast. After all, we'd only known each other a short time. Her expression didn't change. Her voice hardened. She said men who hesitate waste everyone's time, that her daughter's future wasn't something to gamble with. The daughter still said nothing. Every time I shifted in my chair, I felt her mother's gaze like a weight pinning me in place. The house seemed smaller, the air pressed tight, as if the walls themselves were leaning in. I noticed little things then, the clock ticking too loudly on the wall, the absence of any other photos or signs of a life lived beyond this routine. No snapshots of vacations, no clutter, no warmth, just sterile order. Finally, I stood. My voice cracked as I muttered something about needing to leave early. Work in the morning. The mother's lips thinned. She didn't argue. She didn't even look disappointed. She just nodded once, curt, like she'd expected this outcome. Her daughter rose automatically, walking me to the door. She still hadn't said a word since before her mother arrived. As I stepped onto the porch, she reached out, her hand brushing my arm lightly. For a heartbeat, I thought she'd whisper something, maybe an apology or a plea. Instead, she just looked at me. Not pleading, not apologetic, not angry, just empty. I left without looking back. That night, my phone buzzed with a text from her number. Just one line. My mother liked you. My stomach dropped. I blocked the number immediately, but the words burned into my mind. I lay awake replaying every detail. Her silence, the way her mother's questions came rehearsed, the stiff formality of the whole night. None of it felt like an overprotective parent making awkward conversation. It felt like a process, a system, something they had done before. And the daughter's silence haunted me most of all. Not shock, not defiance, just submission, like she was resigned to the role she'd been given, repeating the cycle meal after meal, man after man. Sometimes I picture another guy sitting at that table now, the same spotless plates in front of him, the same questions fired across the linen cloth. I see her beside him, quiet, staring down at her food while her mother maps out a life with surgical precision. I wonder how many dinners like that have happened in that house. And I wonder if one day someone won't get up from the table. The night felt ordinary until it didn't. We'd gone for burgers, wandered around, and ended up back at his place to watch something lazy on TV. His house was exactly what you'd expect from a student rental: mismatched furniture, laundry in slumped piles, a half-dead plant doing its best to live alive on the sill. I didn't think twice about any of it. We settled on the couch, in with the remote and me nursing a drink. He was easy company, chatty in the way people are when they want to seem relaxed. After a while, I excused myself to use the bathroom. Small, clean enough, shampoo bottles, a towel over the radiator, a toothbrush, and a cup. Nothing that made me pause. On the way back, I saw the door. At the end of the hall, there was a small, unassuming door with a padlock hanging from the hasp. The lock wasn't engaged, it dangled open, the latch slightly misaligned. The door itself was cracked wide enough that a strip of dim light leaked through. Most people pass closed doors without a second thought, but something about that lock, locked, but not salty cold. Curiosity pushed me forward before I could talk myself out of it. I nudged the door. The smell hit me first. Paper and dust, dry and old, like an attic that had been sealed for years. Then I saw the walls. They were covered. Floor to ceiling, every inch plastered with Polaroids, rows and rows of small square faces. Women mostly of all ages and styles, young and stiff with prom smiles, others older with tired eyes, some candid and laughing, some posed perfect and glossy. Some photos were new and bright, others were browned at the edges, curling like leaves. They overlapped, taped over each other until the plaster beneath was invisible. My stomach turned. I stepped in before I could stop myself. The floor was littered with shoeboxes stuffed with more pictures, film wrappers spilling like confetti, scissors with sticky tape tangled at the corner. On a small desk, someone had arranged a Polaroid camera like a religious object, resting in the center as if it were the altar of the room. And then I saw it. A single photograph pinned at eye level, my face. It was unmistakable. The same top I'd been wearing that night, the same half smile I'd given when the show made a joke. The angle suggested it had been taken from across the room while I sat on his couch, drink in hand. There was no blur from motion, no accidental flash bounce, as though the image had been composed, framed, and printed with deliberate care. For a second I couldn't breathe. The room tilted. I stumbled back and the door frame caught my elbow. The padlock clattered against the wood like a tiny bell. From the living room came the sound of movement, the light scraping shuffle of feet, the rustle of the sleeve. I had maybe 30 seconds to register that the door was open and someone else might be nearby. I slammed the door nearly shut and let the padlock swing. My hands were trembling so badly the metal knocked against the wood. I went back to the couch and sat down like nothing had happened. He walked in a moment later, smiling, asking if I'd been okay in there. Bathroom's fine. I lied, the words rough in my mouth. He flopped down, turned the volume up a notch, and laughed at the show. I nodded and tried to focus on the screen, but the walls with their taped faces kept dragging at my head. The next half hour was a blur. Him talking, me forcing answers, the Polaroid image of my face replaying in my mind. Whenever he got up, the floorboards creaked in the same rhythm I heard earlier, and a cold splinter of fear shot through me. I felt unmoored, like someone had shifted the floor under my feet and I was waiting for the world to right itself. When I left that night, he walked me to the door, casual, polite, the perfect gentleman act. He kissed my cheek like friends do, wished me good night. I didn't breathe properly until I was halfway down the street. The city felt both loud and absurdly small at the same time, my footsteps too loud in the emptiness. That night, I could not stop thinking about the room. The way the photos were layered like wallpaper, the meticulous rows that turned faces into pattern and people into inventory. The Polaroid of me, perfectly developed and already cataloged, another face added to the archive. I sat in bed flicking through the memory like a sheet of negatives, turning the photo over in my head until it blurred. I blocked his number the next morning. It felt like the only concrete move I could make, a line drawn in sand. I told 2 friends, one of them incredulous and the other immediately practical. You should call the police, she said. That's possession and invasion of privacy. It's terrifying. Save the details. I was hesitant. Part of me wanted to pin down the room as proof, but another part knew how small the police can make you feel when you bring them a single photo and a story that sounds half like a prank. I thought about going back by myself in daylight, out slipping a hand inside the shoeboxes and dragging the images into harsh noon. I thought about calling him, asking in a voice that would make him feel stupid and frightened. But every logical plan was undermined by a quieter, more primal fear. Someone had been in his house and taken pictures without me knowing. Someone had already printed them and put them on the wall. What if he'd done more than that? What if those boxes held images of moments I hadn't even realized had been recorded? Days passed. Sometimes I imagined the worst, hidden cameras placed in the couch, tiny lenses concealed in toys or pictured frames. Other times my fear took on a bureaucratic form, legal invasion of privacy, prosecution, a court that would ask me to relive every uncomfortable second. I replayed the sight of my Polaroid pinned at the center of his wall until the edges of the image softened. At night, the city felt full of eyes. Strangers' faces merged into the pattern of the Polaroid wall in my head. I found myself jumping when people brushed past on the train, mindful of angles, aware of how often my photo could be taken without my knowledge. Weeks later, life pushed me forward. The novelty of fear dulls into an ache that lays low under the day. I moved on, met someone else briefly, laughed at jokes again. But sometimes, when the lights are low and my phone is dim on the table, I picture that room. I picture the desk with its pile of film wrappers, the camera on its little altar, the boxes and the overlapping faces like wallpaper. I still have that image of my own face pinned there, a small square in a field of other low rectangles. Sometimes I imagine it yellowing with the others, corners curling. Other times I imagine it as it was that night, sharp and new, my smile frozen mid-laugh, already catalogued. I never went back to prove it and never pressed charges. The world offers 1,000 ways to be disbelieved, and I didn't want to fight to make my fear legitimate. Blocking his number felt like closing a door, even if it didn't lock the memory away. Sometimes when I'm alone and the house is quiet, I can feel the weight of that photograph like it's waiting behind a cupboard, watching, patient as a tucked-away insect. The thought that my face could be one more tile in someone's private mosaic is small, precise, and it lingers. In the end, the worst part isn't even the wall. It's the knowledge that somewhere out of sight, ordinary rooms can hold private galleries, and people you thought you knew can frame you like a picture and hang you up among 1,000 other faces. She had that look in her eyes when she said she had something to show me. Not flirty, not teasing, but deliberate, like she'd been waiting all night for the right moment. We'd already eaten dinner, lounged on her couch with music playing from her phone, talked about nothing in particular. Comfortable, casual, exactly what a second date is supposed to feel like. Then she stood, smoothed her hair back, and told me to follow her. The door she went to was the back of the kitchen. At first glance, it looked like a pantry door, but when she turned the knob and pulled, it creaked open to reveal a staircase dropping into darkness. The smell hit me first. Old wood, dry dust, faint mildew. She flicked a switch, and a single yellow bulb buzzed to life somewhere below, throwing a weak circle of light on bare concrete. I hesitated, but she only smiled over her shoulder, barefoot on the first step, and said, "Come on." I followed. The basement was half finished, like someone had started to renovate it years ago and then abandoned the project. Drywall on two walls, insulation exposed on another. A strip of carpet covered one corner, frayed at the edges. The rest was just cold gray floor. There wasn't much down there: a broken chair, a stack of boxes, a mattress leaning upright against the wall like it had been dumped there. And then I saw them. Chains. Two of them bolted directly into the concrete foundation. Thick metal links, the kind that would take more than bolt cutters to snap. They hung loose, waist height, long enough to clink softly against the wall when the air shifted. The steel looked new, polished, too clean for a damp basement. My stomach dropped. She walked right up to them like they were nothing. Ran her hand along the links, fingers brushing over the padlock dangling from the end. Then she turned back toward me and grinned. That grin chilled me. She laughed light and easy and said it was a joke. Something about pranking a friend. Her tone made it sound like I was supposed to find it funny, like it was quirky basement decor. But I didn't laugh. The air felt thick in my throat. I stayed where I was, halfway across the room, staring at the bolts sunk deep into the wall. My eyes adjusted to the dim light, and I noticed something else. Faint scratches in the concrete beneath the chains. Long, erratic scrapes, as if something metal had dragged across the floor again and again. She tilted her head, still smiling, waiting for me to join in the laughter. My hands were shaking. She kept talking, her voice airy, explaining it away as if it were no big deal. But her words blurred. My mind was cataloging details instead. The shine of the bolts, too new to have been there long, the rolled carpet near the mattress, edges curled up just enough to reveal another bolt in the floor underneath. A pattern was forming, one I didn't want to finish. I forced myself to speak, asking casually what else was down here. My voice cracked, but I tried to sound curious instead of terrified. She shrugged and pointed lazily at the boxes. Childhood stuff, she said. Old junk. But she didn't move toward them. She stayed close to the chains, her fingers trailing over the links like she couldn't help herself. My throat was dry. I made up an excuse about needing the bathroom and turned toward the stairs. Every step creaked under my weight. I expected her to call after me to stop me, to let the laughter drop. But she just stood there, watching. Back in the kitchen, the air felt lighter, though my chest stayed tight. She followed me up slowly, still smiling, her footsteps measured. When she reappeared in the doorway, she carried the same expression she'd worn in the basement. That look that said I was missing the punchline. We sat back down in the living room, but nothing felt comfortable anymore. I couldn't focus on what she was saying. My mind kept returning to the basement. The chains, the bolts, the scratches. The way she touched the metal like it was intimate, like it meant something private. She leaned closer, laughing about some story I'd barely heard. I forced smiles, nods, the occasional laugh that sounded wrong even to me. Inside, my pulse hammered. Every time her hand brushed my arm, I fought the urge to flinch. When it got late, I told her I had to head home. She pouted, playful on the surface, but there was an edge to it. She pressed me to stay the night, said we could watch another movie, that she had something better to show me later. Her eyes glittered when she said it. I shook my head, muttering something about work in the morning. She held my gaze for a beat too long before finally letting me stand. She walked me to the door, hugged me tightly, her chin resting against my shoulder. As I stepped outside, she whispered in my ear, "Next time." The porch light buzzed overhead. I walked fast down her street, my footsteps echoing louder than they should have. Only once I turned the corner did I let myself breathe. At home, sleep wouldn't come. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the chain swaying gently in the dim yellow light, the bolts gleaming, the scratches on the floor. I heard the clink of metal and her laugh layered over it, soft and amused. The next morning, I blocked her number. No explanation, no goodbye, just gone. But the image stuck. Sometimes when I replay it, I wonder if I was the first person she'd shown it to. If it was some bizarre test, a twisted sense of humor she only revealed once she trusted you enough to see her real side. Other times I wonder if I wasn't the first. If others had stood where I stood, staring at those chains, trying to laugh it off. And maybe, just maybe, I was the first one to leave. The night itself was unremarkable. Nothing dramatic, nothing that felt like the start of a story worth remembering. We had a few drinks, the kind where the laughter is louder than it should be, and the flirting feels clumsy but endearing. One thing led to another, and I followed him back to his place. There wasn't a single red flag. His apartment wasn't spotless, but it wasn't disgusting either. It felt lived in. A couch draped with a blanket, a couple of mugs in the sink, stacks of books leaning against a TV stand. The faint smell of laundry detergent hung in the air, comforting and domestic in a way. He dimmed the lights, put on some music, and the whole place hummed with normalcy. I remember the details because they grounded me. The blue mug with a chip along its rim. The crooked movie poster taped to the wall, corners curling, his jacket tossed across the back of a chair. Those little ordinary markers you latch onto when you're in a stranger's space for the first time. Things that reassure you this is real, this is safe. We stayed up later than I expected. Talking, laughing, letting the alcohol fade into a haze. Eventually, I drifted off in his bed, the sound of the city muffled through the window. Everything about it felt ordinary. That's what makes the next part worse. When I woke up, something was wrong before I even opened my eyes. The air felt off. Still, too clean. Like stepping into a staged room instead of a lived-in one. I sat up slowly, blinking against the pale morning light, and froze. The room was spotless. Not tidy. Not organized. Empty. The bed frame was gone. The mattress I'd fallen asleep on, gone. I was curled directly on the floor, rough carpet pressing into my skin. The posters, the books, the jacket. Gone. Every object I remembered was stripped away, leaving nothing but bare walls. I staggered to my feet, panic already prickling in my chest. The kitchen was worse. Counters bare, the sink empty. The fridge unplugged, its door hanging open to reveal hollow metal shelves. The couch had vanished too, leaving behind only faint impressions on the carpet where the legs must have rested. I checked the bathroom. Stripped. No toothbrush, no shampoo bottles, no shower curtain, not even a towel. It was like no one had ever lived there. I scrambled for my phone. 8:12 a.m. I'd fallen asleep sometime after 2. Less than 6 hours. It wasn't enough time for someone to empty an entire apartment while I slept in the next room. My stomach twisted as I called his number, straight to voicemail. I bolted downstairs. By the mailboxes, a small office door stood open. Inside, a man in his 60s sat behind a cluttered desk, glasses perched low on his nose, a newspaper spread in front of him. I asked breathless if he'd seen the tenant in 3B. He frowned, lowering the paper. 3B. Yes, I said. Dark hair, maybe mid-20s. He lives there. The landlord shook his head slowly. Nobody's in 3B. That unit's been vacant for months. I stared at him, convinced I'd misheard. I insisted, describing the apartment, the chipped blue mug, the crooked poster, the books piled near the TV stand. He looked at me like I was unwell. Then, perhaps to prove a point, he pulled a battered folder from a drawer. Lease records. He flipped through pages until he found the one for 3B. The last tenant had moved out 6 months ago. The name didn't match the man I had met. I told him there had to be a mistake. I'd been inside the unit just last night. I'd slept there. I could describe everything. His frown deepened. Finally, with a sigh, he offered to show me. I followed him upstairs, my pulse thundering. He unlocked the door with a heavy brass key and pushed it open. The apartment was bare. Not just empty, sterile, white walls. A floor coated in fine dust. No indent on the carpet where a couch might have stood. No discoloration where posters had been taped. No faint smell of detergent, just the stale odor of a space left unused. The spot where I swore I'd woken up, soft beige carpet under my cheek, was rough and gray. The landlord turned to me, arms crossed, expression unreadable. Satisfied. I nodded numbly, throat dry, and backed out of the apartment. Outside, the world looked frustratingly normal. People walked, dogs. Cars pulled out of driveways. The city carried on with its ordinary rhythm, blind to the gaping hole in my reality. I stood on the sidewalk, staring at the building, my mind replaying details over and over. The chipped mug. The crooked poster. The jacket tossed on the chair. I'd touched them. They'd been real. And now they weren't. That day blurred into nothing. I deleted his number from my phone, not because I wanted to, but because there was no point in keeping it. It didn't connect to anyone anymore. No messages, no call history, just a string of digits that suddenly felt meaningless. It was like he'd never existed. But here's what unsettles me most. Sometimes I dream about that blue mug. I feel the chipped edge against my lip, the weight of it in my hand, the faint taste of wine we poured into it because we ran out of glasses. In the dream, I know it's real. And then I wake up to nothing. No mug, no poster, no jacket, no trace of him or his apartment in any world except my memory. I don't tell the story often. People are quick to write it off as a bad date blurred by alcohol or a dream I convinced myself was real. Maybe that's easier for them to believe. But I know what I saw. And I know that for one night, that apartment existed until it didn't. It felt easy with her from the start. No games, no awkward silences, just that steady comfort that makes you want to see someone again and again. We fell into a rhythm without ever meaning to. Drinks after work that turned into dinners. Weekend breakfasts that turned into whole Saturdays together. Staying over at each other's places like it was natural, like we'd been doing it for years instead of weeks. I liked her, really liked her. Enough that I stopped overanalyzing things, stopped waiting for the catch. Then she mentioned her brother. It was casual, almost an afterthought, like she was telling me about her weekend errands. She said he was protective, maybe a little overbearing, but I like him. Her tone was light, reassuring. I pictured some typical older sibling type, the kind who teases you, makes dumb jokes, maybe pulls you aside to give the don't hurt her speech. When she asked if I wanted to meet him, I said yes without hesitation. Meeting family seemed fast, sure, but if she trusted me enough to introduce me, it had to mean something good. The night I met him, we were at her apartment, a cozy one-bedroom on the second floor of an old building. She said her brother would be stopping by to drop something off. I was nervous in that way you get when you're about to meet someone important, worried about saying the wrong thing without coming across too stiff or too casual. When he walked in, he wasn't what I expected. He was taller than me, broad-shouldered, the kind of presence that fills a room even when he doesn't say much. He had this serious expression that didn't shift when he shook my hand. His grip was firm, his eyes locked onto mine like he was evaluating something I couldn't see. She stood between us, introduced us with a quick smile, then disappeared into the kitchen to grab drinks. For a few minutes, it was just me and him. He asked basic things, where I worked, how long we'd been seeing each other, whether I lived nearby. His tone wasn't rude, but it wasn't friendly either. Flat, like he was running through a checklist. I tried cracking a joke to lighten the mood. Nothing. His face didn't change. When she came back, everything shifted. She handed him a beer, sat down close to me, her hand brushing mine. Suddenly, the tension seemed less noticeable. They bickered a little about something small. Groceries, I think, or rent money. It sounded normal enough, a kind of sibling squabble you forget 5 minutes later. By the time he left an hour later, I'd almost convinced myself I'd imagined the intensity. He gave me a nod on his way out, no goodbye, no smile. She just rolled her eyes and said he was always like that. I believed her. Months passed. Our relationship deepened. We were spending most nights together, talking about trips we wanted to take, places we wanted to see. The brother faded into the background of my mind. Until one afternoon, when everything cracked. I was scrolling through social media on my lunch break, barely paying attention, when her name popped up in a tag. A mutual acquaintance. Someone I'd met once at a party, had posted pictures from a wedding they'd attended the year before. Out of curiosity, I clicked. And there she was. In a white dress. Next to him. Not as her brother, as her husband. My stomach dropped so fast I thought I'd be sick. The caption didn't leave room for doubt. Their names. Congratulations from friends and family. Post after post of them cutting a cake, sharing a dance, smiling at each other like every cliche of newlyweds. The timeline was unmistakable. A year ago. Too recent to be some old mistake. I scrolled through every picture, trying to catch some detail I'd missed. Some explanation, but there wasn't one. Just her beaming. Him, in a tux, and on her waist. And me sitting here with my blood running cold. I couldn't wait. That night, I confronted her. She didn't deny knowing him. She didn't even flinch when I said his name. She just stared at me, lips pressed into a thin line, eyes unreadable. When I pushed harder, she finally spoke. She said I misunderstood. That things were complicated. that it wasn't what it looked like. But no matter how I pressed, she wouldn't explain, wouldn't admit the truth, wouldn't even attempt a real lie. The days that followed were chaos. My phone started buzzing with messages from numbers I didn't recognize. Short, sharp phrases. Back off. She's not yours. You don't know what you're in. I blocked them. More came. She stopped showing up altogether. No calls, no texts. Vanished from the apps we met on. When I stopped by her apartment a week later, the blinds were drawn. Within 2 more weeks, the place was empty. Mail lock stuffed, no lights on, no trace of her. She was gone. I told myself I'd move on, that it wasn't worth obsessing over, but the questions gnawed at me. The lies. The way she'd sat there, calm, while I shook his hand. The casual bickering. The rehearsed normalcy. Months later, I saw her one last time. It was by accident in a grocery store parking lot. I was pushing a cart toward my car when I spotted them across the lot. Him. They weren't walking like siblings. They weren't walking like strangers. They were side by side, her arm linked in his, moving in unison the way couples do. She saw me. Our eyes met. She didn't smile, didn't wave. Just kept walking, her face blank, unreadable. But he looked right at me. Not angry, not smug, just blank, like he was daring me to say something. I didn't. I got into my car and drove away, hands shaking on the wheel, heart pounding like I'd narrowly avoided something I didn't understand. I never tried to contact her again. But sometimes late at night I replay it all. The handshake, the questions, the brother who was never her brother. And I wonder if I've been tested from the start. If every dinner, every laugh, every touch was just another step in some game I never knew I was playing.